Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight we're diving into some truly wild Reddit stories while I keep things calm here in Minecraft. Just building, mining, and watching chaos unfold from a safe distance. Tonight's lineup is stacked with workplace scandals, secret recordings, family explosions, and the kind of digital evidence that makes lawyers rub their hands together. Alright, before we dive in, quick shout out to the legends who keep showing up, dropping comments, and fueling this channel with good vibes. You're the real MVPs. Seriously, thank you for making this whole thing way more awesome. So settle in because this first story starts innocent enough. A hookup at a conference, two strangers agreeing to keep things casual, and then walking into the office 2 weeks later to find that stranger sitting at the head of the table as your new boss. Yeah, it gets messy fast. I matched with someone on a dating app during a work conference in Denver. I was only there for 3 days, sitting through panels about supply chain optimization and pretending to care about keynote speakers who all said the same thing. By the second night, I was bored out of my mind, so I opened the app just to kill time. That's when I saw Alex. Great smile, funny bio, and according to the little distance marker, they were less than a mile away. I sent a message not expecting much, but we started talking immediately. The conversation flowed so easily it felt like we'd known each other for years. Within an hour, we'd made plans to meet up for drinks. We met at this dimly lit cocktail bar near the convention center, the kind of place with exposed brick and bartenders who take themselves way too seriously. But honestly, I wasn't paying attention to any of that. Alex was even better in person. We talked about everything and nothing, laughed at the same stupid jokes, and somewhere around the third drink, we both just knew where the night was heading. We didn't exchange last names, didn't ask where we worked or what we did for a living. It felt liberating, like we were both playing characters in some movie where consequences didn't exist. We went back to my hotel room and had one of those nights that feels too good to be real. In the morning, we ordered room service, laughed about how we'd both have to sneak out to our respective obligations, and agreed to keep it simple. No strings, no follow-up, just a good memory. We exchanged first names only, hugged goodbye in the hallway, and that was it. Clean break. Or so I thought. 2 weeks later, I started my new job. I'd been job hunting for months and finally landed a position at a company I actually respected. The pay was better, the benefits were solid, and I was genuinely excited for a fresh start. I showed up on my first day wearing my best outfit, armed with a notebook and way too much caffeine. HR walked me through the usual onboarding paperwork, gave me the tour, and then brought me to the conference room for the team meeting. I sat down next to a few coworkers who introduced themselves, and I was busy trying to remember everyone's names when the door opened. My new manager walked in. It was Alex. I'm not exaggerating when I say my entire body went cold. We locked eyes across the conference room, and I watched their face go completely pale. For a second, I thought maybe I was hallucinating, that the lack of sleep and first day nerves were making me see things. But no, it was definitely them. Same smile, same eyes, same person I'd spent an incredibly intimate night with 2 weeks ago. They recovered faster than I did, slipping into full professional mode like flipping a switch. They introduced themselves to the room using their full name, welcomed me to the team with the same polite tone they use for everyone else, and didn't let their gaze linger on me for even a second longer than necessary. But I could feel the tension radiating off them. I could barely focus on anything being said for the rest of the meeting. After it wrapped, I tried to slip out quickly, but Alex caught up with me in the hallway and very calmly, very professionally, said they'd like to schedule a one-on-one with me that afternoon to go over my role and responsibilities. Their voice was steady, but I saw their hand shake slightly when they checked their phone for availability. I just nodded and said that sounded great, even though my brain was screaming. The rest of the morning was a blur. I sat at my new desk pretending to read through training documents while internally spiraling. What were the odds? How was this even possible? And more importantly, what the hell were we supposed to do now? I ran through a dozen scenarios in my head. Maybe they'd be weird and distant. Maybe they'd pretend it never happened. Maybe they'd ask me to transfer teams. I had no idea what to expect when I knocked on their office door that afternoon. They told me to come in and close the door. I sat down across from them, and for a few seconds, we just stared at each other in absolute silence. Then they exhaled and said we needed to set boundaries. They were clearly trying to sound authoritative and managerial, but I could hear the nervousness underneath. They said what happened in Denver was a mistake, that it was before they knew I'd be on their team, and that we both needed to act like it never happened. They used words like professionalism and workplace conduct, and I just sat there nodding along, agreeing with everything they said. It all made perfect sense. We were adults. We could handle this. It was one night. We could move on. But then they stood up to hand me a file with some project details, and when they leaned across the desk to pass it to me, our hands brushed. It was such a small thing, barely a touch, but the air in the room shifted instantly. They froze. I froze. We were close enough that I could smell their cologne, the same one from that night, and suddenly all the rational boundaries we just agreed on felt completely meaningless. They pulled back quickly, cleared their throat, and sat down like nothing had happened. But we both knew. The tension didn't go anywhere. If anything, it got worse. Over the next few weeks, we tried so hard to keep things normal. They were polite and professional in meetings. I made sure to never be alone with them unless it was work-related. We didn't text outside of business hours. We didn't make eye contact longer than necessary. But it was like trying to ignore a live wire. Every interaction felt charged. When they'd lean over my desk to look at my screen during a project review, I'd feel my pulse spike. When we'd both reach for the same report in a meeting, our fingers would touch and we'd both jerk back like we'd been burned. It was exhausting. And then one evening, we were both working late. Everyone else had gone home and the office was empty except for us. They came by my desk to ask a question about a client deliverable, and I don't even remember who moved first, but suddenly we were kissing in the dim glow of my computer screen. That's when everything unraveled. We started sneaking around. It was reckless and stupid and we both knew it, but we couldn't stop. We'd stay late and meet in their office. We'd take lunch breaks separately and end up in the same parking garage. We'd send carefully worded emails that looked professional on the surface but meant something else entirely. For a while it felt like we were getting away with it, but then people started noticing. A coworker made a joke about how we were always the last ones to leave. Someone from another team asked if we carpooled, because our cars were always parked near each other. HR sent out a reminder email about workplace relationships and reporting requirements, and I swear Alex's face went white when they read it during a meeting. We tried to cool it off, but the damage was already done. I think people know, or at least suspect. And honestly, I don't even know what we're doing anymore. We haven't defined it. We haven't talked about what happens if this blows up. We're just stuck in this messy limbo where every day feels like we're one slip away from a disaster that could tank both our careers. This feels like a deleted scene from a sitcom, except nobody's laughing and there's no easy resolution waiting at the end of the episode. The worst part is I actually like this job. I like the work, I like my coworkers, and I definitely still like Alex. But we're playing with fire and we both know it. At some point, something's going to give. Either we come clean, or someone figures it out, or one of us transfers, or we explode spectacularly in a way that gets us both fired. I just don't know which one it'll be yet. All I know is that what started as one spontaneous night in Denver has turned into the most complicated situation of my professional life, and I have no idea how to fix it. You almost have to admire the audacity of thinking you can keep a secret like that in an office where people notice when you change your coffee order. But if you think mixing business with pleasure is messy, wait until you hear how recording someone without permission can backfire in the most satisfying way possible. I should have known something was off when my roommate started acting like she had the world's best inside joke and I wasn't in on it. We'd been living together for about 8 months at that point, and things had always been fine. Not best friends or anything, but civil, respectful. Then suddenly she's glued to her phone every time I walk into a room, whispering into it like she's conducting some kind of covert operation, and smirking at me whenever I'd say literally anything. At first I thought maybe she'd started dating someone, and was in that annoying honeymoon phase where everything is a secret. I tried to ignore it, but the energy in our apartment shifted. It felt like I was being watched, like every word I said was being catalogued for some purpose I couldn't understand. It went on like that for weeks. I'd come home from work exhausted, vent about my day, and she'd be on her phone, barely looking up, but I could see this little smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I started second-guessing everything I said. Was I being too loud, too emotional? Was I oversharing? I even started spending more time in my room just to avoid the weird tension. And then one afternoon, I was cleaning the kitchen because she sure as hell wasn't going to do it, and I knocked over the little succulent she kept on the table. When I picked it up to replant it, I saw it, a tiny voice recorder, taped to the underside of our kitchen table. My hands went cold. I just stood there holding this thing, trying to process what I was looking at. It took me a few seconds to even move. When I finally did, I pulled it free, took it to my room, and locked the door. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I hit play. It was my voice, my conversations, weeks of them. Me on the phone with my therapist talking about my anxiety, me crying to my best friend about my breakup, me ranting about work stress, about my family, about everything I thought was private, and in the background occasionally I could hear her laugh. Soft, quiet, like she was enjoying a show. I felt sick. I scrolled through the files. There were dozens. Some were just mundane, me talking about groceries or whatever. But others were deeply personal, vulnerable, the kind of stuff you only say when you think you're safe. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march into her room and throw the recorder at her face and demand to know what kind of psychopath does something like this. But I didn't. I sat there on my bed, shaking, trying to think clearly. And that's when I remembered something. A few days earlier, I'd heard her on the phone in her room, laughing with someone, saying my name. At the time, I thought I'd imagined it. Now I knew I hadn't. I opened her social media, scrolled through her recent activity, and there it was, a group chat she'd recently been active in. I didn't have access to it, but I could see the preview of one message. It was a voice note, sent by her, and the caption underneath said, "Wait till you hear this one, she's literally sobbing." I'm not a violent person, but in that moment I genuinely considered arson. Instead, I did something smarter. I went online and ordered my own voice recorder. 2-day shipping. I didn't say a word to her. I acted completely normal. I even made small talk in the kitchen like nothing had happened. She had no idea I'd found hers, and when mine arrived, I planted it in her room, tucked behind a picture frame on her dresser. Small, invisible, perfect. Then I waited. Within 48 hours, I had everything I needed. And I mean everything. She talked to herself more than I expected, which honestly made the whole thing easier. On day one, I caught her on the phone with someone, laughing about how she'd been documenting the roommate experience and how her friends thought I was pathetic. That part stung, but I kept listening. On day two, she mentioned that she'd scratched my car on purpose because I'd asked her to take out the trash. She said it so casually, like it was nothing, like I was nothing, but that wasn't even the worst part. On day three, she had a friend over, and they started talking about our security deposit. She told her friend that she was planning to move out at the end of the lease and take the full deposit with her by claiming I'd caused all the damage in the apartment. She had a whole plan. She was going to say I'd stained the carpets, broken the blinds, scuffed the walls. She even joked about how she'd already taken photos of things I hadn't touched and was going to submit them as evidence. Her friend laughed and said, "You're evil." And my roommate said, "I know." I sat there with headphones on, listening to her plot my financial ruin like it was a fun weekend project, and something inside me just snapped. Not in an explosive way, in a cold, calculating way. The kind of clarity you only get when someone crosses a line so far beyond decency that you stop caring about being the bigger person. I spent the next 2 days compiling everything. I edited the recordings down to the most damning parts, her admitting she keyed my car, her bragging about stealing the deposit, her mocking me to her friends, her entire confession about framing me for damage I didn't cause. I burned it onto a flash drive, made a backup, and then I sent it to 3 people, our landlord, her mother, and her father. Then I waited again. She came home 2 days later, and I was in the living room pretending to watch TV. She walked in, looked at her phone, and her face went sheet white. She just stood there in the doorway, staring at the screen, and I watched her whole body language shift. Panic. Pure panic. She looked at me. I looked back. I didn't say anything. I just raised my eyebrows like, "What's up?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and went straight to her room. I heard her on the phone within seconds, voice high and frantic, trying to explain something to someone. I assumed it was her parents. About 10 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. It was our landlord. He didn't even look at her. He walked past her, handed me a document, and said, "I'll need her out in 30 days. You're not responsible for any of this." Then he turned to her and said, "We'll be discussing the car damage and the deposit separately. Expect to hear from my lawyer." Her face crumpled. She tried to argue, tried to say it was taken out of context, that I'd manipulated the recordings, that it wasn't fair. He cut her off and said, "I listened to the whole thing, multiple times. You're done." Then he left. She stood there in the hallway shaking, and I could see her trying to decide whether to yell at me or beg me for mercy. She did neither. She just went back to her room and slammed the door. That night, I heard her crying on the phone with her mum. I didn't feel bad. The next morning, there was an eviction notice taped to her door. She had 30 days to vacate. She avoided me entirely after that. Didn't make eye contact, didn't speak. Just moved through the apartment like a ghost. I'd see her packing boxes late at night, sniffling, talking quietly on the phone to friends who probably didn't even know the full story. Part of me wondered if she'd told them what she'd done, or if she'd spun it as me being crazy and vindictive. I didn't care either way. 3 weeks later, she was gone. No goodbye, no apology. Just an empty room and the faint smell of her lavender candles. The landlord contacted me a few days after she moved out and said she'd tried to dispute the deposit claim, but between the recordings and his own documentation of her lies, she didn't have a leg to stand on. He refunded me my half in full and kept hers to cover repairs and legal fees. I also got a text from her mum. Just one line. "I'm sorry for what she put you through." I didn't respond. Looking back, I think the thing that gets me the most isn't even the recording itself. It's the fact that she thought she could get away with it. That she could humiliate me, destroy my property, steal from me, and just walk away clean. Like I was some kind of side character in her life who wouldn't fight back. She underestimated me, and honestly, that was her biggest mistake. Speaking of things people don't see coming, imagine watching your fiancé's so-called business trip unfold in real time on the internet. My fiancé came home one Thursday evening looking frazzled. He barely made eye contact when he told me his boss needed him in Miami for a last-minute business trip. Said it was some urgent client situation that couldn't wait. I could tell he was stressed, so I didn't ask too many questions. I kissed him goodbye Friday morning, told him to be safe, and settled in for a quiet weekend alone. Friday night rolled around, and I was doing what any reasonable person does when they're bored and alone, mindlessly scrolling Instagram on the couch with a glass of wine. I follow this beach club in Miami because I've always wanted to go there. They post these gorgeous sunset photos, and sometimes they go live to show off their weekend crowd. I clicked on their live stream without thinking much of it. Just wanted to see the vibe, maybe get some vacation inspiration. The camera was panning across their VIP section. Bottle service, sparklers, people dancing on tables, the whole Miami nightlife experience. And then I saw him, my fiancé, clear as day in the background, sitting in a curved booth with a bottle of champagne on the table. He had his arm draped around a woman in a neon bikini top. She was leaning into him, laughing at something he said. He looked relaxed, happy even, not stressed about work, not exhausted from meetings, just there, living his best life while I sat at home thinking he was grinding through presentations in some hotel conference room. I felt my stomach drop. For a second, I thought maybe I was seeing things. Maybe it was someone who just looked like him. But no, that was definitely his watch. The same shirt he'd packed that morning. The same stupid haircut he'd gotten 2 days earlier. I grabbed my phone so fast I almost dropped my wine glass and started screen recording. My hands were shaking, but I got at least 2 minutes of footage before the live stream switched to a different angle. I sat there staring at my phone, replaying the video over and over. Part of me wanted to call him immediately and scream. Part of me wanted to drive to the airport and catch the next flight to Miami, just to walk into that club and flip a table. But something stopped me. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was the wine, or maybe it was just the realization that if I acted now, he'd have time to spin some story, to gaslight me into thinking I misunderstood what I saw. So I didn't do anything. Not yet. About an hour later, my phone rang. It was him. I almost didn't answer, but then I realized this was part of it. I needed to hear what he'd say. I picked up and kept my voice as normal as possible. He sounded tired, told me he missed me, said the meetings had been brutal and he was exhausted. He was in his hotel room now, probably going to order room service and crash early. I asked him how it went. He sighed and launched into this whole story about difficult clients and technical issues, and how grateful he was that it'd be over soon. Every word was a lie, every single word. I told him I missed him too, that I'd see him tomorrow, and I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept watching the video, screenshotting the clearest frames, making sure I had every angle saved. By morning, I had a plan. He came home Saturday afternoon. I heard his keys in the door and forced myself to act normal. I hugged him, asked about his trip, listened to him tell more lies about conference rooms and client dinners. He looked me right in the eyes while he did it. That part hurt more than anything. The ease of it, like lying to me, was just another item on his checklist. I told him I'd make dinner, that he should relax and unpack. He seemed relieved, probably thought he'd pulled it off. I made his favorite: steak, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables. I set the table, poured us both wine, even lit candles. He kept saying how lucky he was to have me, how much he appreciated me holding down the fort while he was gone. I just smiled and nodded. We sat down to eat. He was mid-bite when I casually picked up the TV remote. I pulled up the video I'd airdropped to myself and hit play on our big screen. The beach club, the music, the VIP section, and there he was, arm around that woman, looking like he didn't have a care in the world. He froze, fork halfway to his mouth. His face went from confused to pale to bright red in about 3 seconds. He put the fork down and started stammering, asked me what that was, where I got it. I didn't say anything, just let it play. Then came the breaking point. He tried to recover, started saying it wasn't what it looked like, that she was a client, that the whole team went out after their meeting wrapped early, and it was just a work thing. He was just being friendly. I laughed, actually laughed out loud. Told him that was a really creative story, but I wasn't interested. He kept talking, getting more desperate, saying I was overreacting, that I should trust him. That's when I pulled out my phone. I showed him the screenshots, time-stamped, geo-tagged, him and her cozy in that booth, looking nothing like co-workers. I asked him if his boss knew the Miami client meeting included bottle service and bikinis. He went quiet. I told him it was fine because his boss definitely knew now. I'd already emailed him the video this morning with a polite note asking if this was standard company protocol for business trips. His face went white, but that wasn't even the worst part. I also told him I'd sent it to his mom, the same woman who'd been helping us plan our wedding, who'd been gushing about how excited she was to officially have me as a daughter-in-law. I figured she should know what kind of man her son really was. And just to make sure we were all on the same page, I'd also forwarded everything to our wedding planner with a short message. The wedding was off. Cancel everything. Send the final invoices. He just sat there. Didn't even try to argue anymore. I think he realized there was no coming back from this. No amount of explaining or apologizing was going to undo what I'd already done. He asked me if I was serious. I looked him dead in the eye and said I'd never been more serious about anything in my life. Then I told him to get out. He tried one more time, said we could work through this, go to therapy, that he'd made a mistake, but he loved me. I held up my hand, the one with his engagement ring still on it, and slowly pulled it off. I set it on the table between us, right next to his plate of now cold steak. Told him he could keep it or pawn it. I didn't care. But I was keeping my dignity. He left that night, packed a bag and went to stay with a friend, I guess. I didn't ask and I didn't care. The next few days were a blur of cancelling vendors, returning gifts, and fielding calls from his mom, who apparently ripped him a new one after seeing that video. She actually apologized to me, said she didn't raise him to be like that, and she was ashamed. That almost made me cry more than anything else. His boss called me too. Apparently the client he was supposed to be meeting never existed. He'd lied about the entire trip, used a fake work excuse to go party in Miami with some woman he'd been seeing on the side. The company launched an investigation into his expense reports. Turns out he'd been billing personal trips as business expenses for months. He got fired 2 weeks later. As for me, I kept the ring. Sold it, actually. Got a pretty decent price for it, and used the money to book a real trip to Miami. Stayed at a 5-star hotel, went to that same beach club, had my own bottle service. Posted it all over Instagram. He watched every single story. I know because his burner account accidentally liked one of them. The wedding's off, the relationship's over, and somehow I've never felt more free. Family secrets have a way of staying buried until someone orders a DNA test for fun and dismantles 3 generations in one afternoon. My sister got one of those DNA ancestry kits for Christmas. You know the kind, the ones that promise to tell you what percentage Irish you are and connect you with distant cousins you'll never actually meet. She was so excited about it that she convinced the whole family to do it together. Mom and Dad, me, even our aunt joined in because she thought it would be fun to compare results. We all did the cheek swabs at Christmas dinner, laughing about how we were probably going to find out we were related to royalty, or something ridiculous like that. We mailed them off the next day, and honestly, I forgot about it completely. It was just a silly holiday activity, something to bond over while we were all together. A few weeks later, my sister called me at 11 o'clock at night. I could tell immediately something was wrong because her voice was shaking. She said the DNA results had come in, and I needed to look at mine right away. I was confused because what could possibly be that urgent about finding out we're 12% Scandinavian or whatever? But she kept insisting, saying she couldn't explain it over the phone and that I just needed to log in and check my account. So I did. And that's when I saw it. Right there in the relatives section, there was a match labeled as a half-sibling. Not a cousin, not a distant relative. A half-sibling. Someone who shared one parent with me. Someone our age. Someone named Marcus who lived 2 towns over. Someone we'd never heard of in our entire lives. I called my sister back immediately, and we both just sat there on the phone in stunned silence for a minute. Then we started going through the possibilities. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the test got contaminated. Maybe this Marcus person was adopted and didn't know his real family, and this was all just a weird coincidence. But the more we looked at the data, the more real it became. The genetic markers didn't lie. This person shared significant DNA with both of us, which meant one of our parents had another kid that we didn't know about. We decided to message him. My sister drafted something carefully worded and neutral, just saying we'd gotten matched as half-siblings and asking if he knew anything about it. He responded within an hour. He said he'd been as shocked as we were when he saw the results. He'd always known he was his parents' biological kid, had never been told he was adopted or anything like that. He had a mom and a dad who raised him, and as far as he knew, they were his real parents. But now the DNA was telling a different story. He seemed just as confused and freaked out as we were. We agreed to dig deeper and figure out what was going on. That's when things started to unravel. Marcus reached out to his mom and asked her directly if there was anything she needed to tell him. She broke down immediately. Turns out she'd had an affair 30 years ago. One night, one mistake, and she got pregnant. She never told her husband. She never told anyone. She just raised Marcus as if everything was normal and buried the secret for 3 decades. And the person she had the affair with? Our dad. My sister and I just sat there staring at our phones when Marcus told us. Our dad, who we'd always thought was this straight-laced, dependable guy, had cheated on our mum 30 years ago and had a whole other kid he never mentioned. We didn't even know how to process it. But that wasn't even the worst part. Marcus's mum started asking her own questions, trying to figure out how this all connected, and that's when another bomb dropped. She'd been having an affair too, around the same time. Not with our dad, with our grandfather. Marcus's supposed father, the man who raised him, wasn't biologically related to him at all. But our grandfather was, which meant Marcus was both our half-brother through our dad and our uncle through our grandfather. The family tree didn't just have branches anymore. It had loops. It was the kind of revelation that makes your brain short-circuit because it's too messy to even diagram. My grandmother found out the same day we did. Not from us, not from a family meeting, but from a Facebook message. Some stranger who was distantly related to Marcus had seen the DNA matches and decided to be helpful by reaching out to connect people. So my grandmother, who was just scrolling through Facebook on a random Tuesday afternoon, got a message that casually mentioned her husband's secret child. She called my mom immediately, hysterical. My mom had no idea what she was talking about until my sister and I finally came clean about what we'd discovered. Then my mom called my dad, and that conversation ended with him moving out that night. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. My parents' marriage imploded in real time. My dad tried to explain that it happened decades ago, that it was a mistake, that he didn't even know Marcus existed, but my mom wasn't hearing it. She said if he could hide something that big for 30 years, she didn't know him at all. My grandmother filed for divorce from my grandfather within the week. She was 82 years old and filing for divorce because of an affair from 3 decades ago that produced a secret grandchild. My aunt, my dad's sister, stopped speaking to all of us. She blamed my sister for doing the DNA test in the first place, said we should have left the past buried. She said our family was fine before we went digging, and now everything was destroyed. Thanksgiving got cancelled. Christmas is probably cancelled too. Nobody's talking to anyone. My dad's living in an apartment across town and trying to build a relationship with Marcus, which feels surreal every time I think about it. My mom won't even say his name. My grandmother moved in with us temporarily because she can't stand to be in the same house as my grandfather. Marcus is trying to process the fact that his entire family structure was a lie, and my sister is carrying around this guilt like she personally detonated a bomb in the middle of our family, even though all she did was spit in a tube. A 15-minute cheek swab destroyed 3 generations of family dinners. Secrets that had been buried for 30 years came screaming to the surface because of a Christmas gift that cost $99. And now nobody's talking to anyone. We went from a normal, functional family to a complete disaster in the span of a few weeks, all because someone thought it would be fun to find out what percentage German we are. I still don't know how we come back from this. I don't know if we do. Some things, once you know them, you can't unknow. And some families, once they break, don't get put back together. We're all just trying to figure out how to exist in this new reality, where everything we thought we knew was wrong, where our dad isn't who we thought he was, where our grandfather isn't who we thought he was, where our family tree looks like something out of a soap opera instead of a normal suburban household. The irony is, the DNA test didn't even tell us anything interesting about our ancestry. Turns out we're mostly English and Irish, which we already knew, but it sure told us a lot about our family, way more than any of us wanted to know. Imagine thinking a fun little holiday activity would be the thing that torches your entire family history. Technology's funny like that. Sometimes it's a DNA test that ruins everything, and sometimes it's just a phone that won't stop buzzing at the wrong moment. My wife had been distant for months. At first I thought it was just stress from work. She'd always been ambitious, always grinding, so when she started staying late at the office more often, I didn't question it. But then the late nights turned into weekends. The weekends turned into entire evenings where she'd come home, barely say 2 words to me, and go straight to bed. She was glued to her phone constantly, but every time I walked into the room, she'd flip it over or tilt the screen away. When I'd ask if everything was okay, she'd give me this tight smile and say she was fine, just tired, just busy. The warmth we used to have disappeared. In bed, she'd turn away from me, and when I tried to initiate any kind of intimacy, she'd mumble something about being exhausted and pull the covers up higher. I felt like I was living with a stranger. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe she was going through something and didn't know how to talk about it. Maybe I wasn't being supportive enough. I tried everything. I planned date nights, I asked about her day, I gave her space when she seemed like she needed it. Nothing changed. If anything, she got more distant. The gap between us kept growing and I didn't know how to close it. I started feeling like I was going crazy, like I was imagining problems that didn't exist. But deep down, I knew something was off. I just didn't want to admit what it might be. Then, one morning, everything clicked into place in the worst possible way. She was in the shower and I was in the kitchen making coffee. Her phone was sitting on the counter next to me, face down like always. I heard a vibration coming from somewhere else. At first I thought it was mine, but my phone was in my pocket. The sound was coming from her purse on the chair. I walked over and the buzzing continued. I opened her bag thinking maybe she'd left her work phone in there or something, and that's when I saw it. A second phone. Cheap, basic, the kind you buy with cash at a convenience store. It was lighting up with texts from a contact saved as J. My stomach dropped. I didn't even think. I just opened it, and what I saw made my hands shake. Months of messages, hundreds of them, plans to meet up, inside jokes, good morning texts, photos I will never be able to unsee. She'd been seeing someone from her gym. That's where all the late nights were going. That's why she was always too tired. The messages were explicit, affectionate, and recent. Like, sent within the last hour recent. There were references to hotels, to lies she'd told me, to how careful they had to be. One message from Jay said something about how much he missed her and couldn't wait to see her tonight after her workout. She'd told me this morning she had yoga later. I heard the shower turn off upstairs. Panic set in. I didn't have time to process what I was reading. I just started taking photos of everything with my own phone, screen after screen. Conversations, timestamps, photos, all of it. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped her burner twice. I heard her footsteps upstairs, the bathroom door opening. I put the phone back exactly where I found it, closed her purse, and went back to the counter like nothing had happened. When she came downstairs in her robe with wet hair, I was pouring myself coffee like it was any other morning. She grabbed her purse, kissed me on the cheek out of habit, and said she'd be home late because of a work thing. I just nodded and said, okay. She had no idea. The second she left for the office, I sat down at my laptop and went through every photo I'd taken. Seeing it all again in the cold light of day made it worse somehow. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was months of deliberate lies. She'd built an entire second life and I'd been too trusting to notice. I felt nauseous. I felt like an idiot. But most of all, I felt done. I didn't cry. I didn't spiral. I just got to work. I contacted a divorce lawyer that afternoon, explained the situation, sent over the evidence, and asked what my options were. They said I had more than enough to file and that given the documentation, this would likely be straightforward. I told them to start the paperwork immediately. I didn't want to drag this out. I didn't want to give her a chance to spin some story or beg for forgiveness. I just wanted out. That same day, I started moving money into a separate account, quietly packing my essentials and figuring out where I could stay short term. I stayed calm, I stayed strategic, and I didn't say a word to her. For the next week, I played the role of oblivious husband. I smiled when she came home late. I nodded when she said she was going to yoga. I asked about her day like I cared. She had no clue. Every night she'd text Jay on her burner phone thinking I was asleep. And every night I'd lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how long she thought she could keep this up. The lawyer was working fast. Papers were being drawn up. I had a friend with a spare room who said I could crash as long as I needed. Everything was falling into place. Then came the breaking point. She told me she had yoga on a Saturday afternoon and would be gone for a few hours. I knew what that really meant. The second she left, I called 2 friends and we moved every single thing I cared about out of that house. Clothes, documents, laptop, sentimental stuff, all of it. I left her things untouched. Didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I even left a note on the kitchen counter. It just said, I know. That's it. 2 words. I didn't owe her more than that. I locked the door behind me, left my key on the table, and drove to my friend's place. I blocked her main number but left the burner unblocked just to see what she'd do. Within 2 hours, my phone started blowing up. Missed calls from her real number, which went straight to voicemail since I'd blocked it. Then the burner started ringing. I watched it light up on my desk and didn't touch it. She called 4 times, then 5. Then texts started coming through. The first few were confused. Where are you? What's going on? Call me. Then they got frantic. Please talk to me. I can explain. It's not what you think. I didn't respond to any of them. I just screenshotted everything and sent it to my lawyer as additional evidence of her trying to control the narrative. She tried calling from Jay's phone next. I didn't answer that either. She left voicemails crying, saying she made a mistake, that she loved me, that we could work through this. But here's the thing. If she loved me, she wouldn't have spent months lying to my face. If she wanted to work through something, she would have talked to me before getting a burner phone and sneaking around with someone else. I wasn't interested in hearing excuses. The lawyer served her papers 3 days later. From what I heard through mutual friends, she lost it. Tried to say I blindsided her, that I didn't give her a chance to explain, but the evidence was damning and she knew it. The divorce moved faster than I expected. No drawn-out court battle, no fighting over assets. She didn't have a leg to stand on, and her lawyer probably told her to settle quietly. It was finalized within a few months. I haven't spoken to her since the day I left. Mutual friends have tried to get me to hear her side of the story, but I don't care. There's no version of events where she comes out looking justified. She made her choices. I made mine. I'm not angry anymore. Honestly, I'm just relieved. Relieved I found out when I did. Relieved I didn't waste more years on someone who didn't respect me. And relieved that I trusted my gut instead of letting her gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid. The funniest part, if you can even call it that, is she tried to friend me on social media a year later. Just sent a request out of nowhere like we were old acquaintances catching up. I deleted it without a second thought. Some people really do think they can rewrite history if they wait long enough. But I'm good. Better than good, actually. I've moved on. She can keep both phones. Imagine thinking a burner phone would save you when the evidence is literally vibrating in your purse during breakfast. And if you think burner phones are bad, just wait until you see what happens when someone tries to frame you with fake evidence. My ex and I broke up about 6 months before all of this happened. It wasn't clean, but it wasn't nuclear either. We dated for 2 years, realized we wanted different things, and called it off. There were some hard feelings, sure, but I figured we'd both move on like adults. I deleted her number, unfollowed her on social media, and focused on my job and my life. I thought that was the end of it. Then I got a call from the police. At first I thought it was a scam, someone saying they were an officer, asking if I'd be willing to come down to the station to discuss a harassment complaint filed against me. I almost hung up, but something in their tone made me realize this was real. My stomach dropped. I asked what they were talking about. They said my ex had filed a report claiming I'd been harassing her for weeks, threatening emails, showing up at her workplace, slashing her tires. I couldn't even process what I was hearing. I told them there had to be some kind of mistake, that I hadn't contacted her at all since the breakup, that I didn't even know where she worked anymore. They said I should come in and bring any evidence I had to support that. I hung up and just sat there in my car, hands shaking, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. I'm a software engineer. I work with data, systems, security protocols. My brain immediately went into problem-solving mode. If she was claiming I sent threatening emails, there would be a digital trail. IP addresses, metadata, timestamps. I logged into my email accounts, checked my sent folders, my trash, everything. Nothing. No emails to her, no drafts, no anything. Then I requested my account activity logs from my email provider. Every login, every action, time-stamped and geotagged. I went through weeks of data. There was nothing that matched what she was claiming. I called a lawyer that same day, explained the situation. He told me to gather everything I could and not to contact her under any circumstances. I spent the next 2 days compiling my work schedule, security footage from my office building, GPS data from my phone, and every piece of digital evidence I could think of. If she was going to accuse me of something I didn't do, I was going to prove it. The police called again and asked me to come in for an interview. I showed up with my lawyer and a flash drive full of evidence. They walked me through her claims. She'd submitted printed emails that looked like they came from my account. Threatening language, explicit descriptions of violence, all supposedly sent over the last 3 weeks. She had photos of her slashed tires. She had doorbell camera footage showing someone in a hoodie outside her apartment at night. She claimed it was me. I asked to see the email headers. The officer looked confused, so I explained that every email has metadata embedded in it that shows where it was sent from. They pulled up the files she'd submitted. I looked at the IP address. It wasn't mine. I cross-referenced it with a public IP lookup tool, right there in the interview room. The emails had been sent from an IP address registered to her apartment complex. The officer's expression changed. I showed them my own email logs, showed them that I hadn't logged into my account from any location other than my home and my office during the time period in question. Showed them my work badge swipes proving I was at the office during several of the alleged incidents. Showed them GPS data from my phone proving I was nowhere near her apartment when she claimed I was outside her door. And here's where it gets absurd. The doorbell footage she submitted had timestamps. I pulled up my work security footage from those exact dates and times. I was on camera at my desk in meetings, verifiably not standing outside her apartment in a hoodie. I even had co-workers who could confirm I'd been in the office. The lawyer pointed out that the person in her doorbell footage wasn't even the same height as me. The officer asked if I had any idea who might have actually slashed her tires. I said I had no idea, but it clearly wasn't me. They thanked me for coming in and said they'd be in touch. I left that station feeling like I'd just survived something I didn't even know I was fighting. But I was also furious. She tried to destroy my life, get me arrested, ruin my reputation. For what? Because she was mad we broke up? Because she wanted attention? I didn't know, and I didn't care. What I did know was that I wasn't going to let this go quietly. I went home and wrote everything out, every detail, every piece of evidence, every timeline. I redacted anything that could identify her directly, but I included screenshots of the metadata, the IP analysis, the timestamps, everything that proved she'd fabricated the entire story. Then I posted it to Reddit. I titled it something like, "My ex tried to frame me for harassment. Here's how I proved she faked all the evidence." It blew up overnight. Thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments. People were horrified. Some were skeptical at first, but I'd included enough technical breakdown that anyone with basic knowledge of how email works could verify what I was saying. The post started getting shared to other subreddits, then to Twitter, then to Facebook. Within 48 hours, it had been screenshotted and reposted across half the internet. That's when things really escalated. Her friends started recognizing details from the post. They reached out to me privately, asking if it was about her. Some of them had already suspected something was off because she'd been telling conflicting stories. One of her coworkers messaged me saying she'd been bragging at work about teaching her ex a lesson, but had suddenly gone quiet when people started asking questions. Her family saw the post too. Her mum actually called me. She apologized, said she had no idea her daughter had done something like this, and that she was ashamed. I didn't know what to say to that. The police contacted me again a few days later. They said they were dropping the case and had issued a formal warning to her about filing false reports. They didn't say it outright, but I got the sense they were considering charging her. I told them to do whatever they thought was appropriate. I wasn't interested in revenge through the legal system. I just wanted it on record that she'd lied. She deleted all her social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everything. Just gone. I kept getting messages from people who knew her, asking if the story was real. I didn't respond to most of them. I just kept posting updates on Reddit. When the police officially closed the case, I posted about it. When her former friends reached out confirming parts of her behavior, I posted about that too. Not out of spite, but because I wanted a record. I wanted anyone who Googled her name or my story to see exactly what happened. Some people told me I was being vindictive, that I should let it go, that posting about it online was stooping to her level, but I didn't see it that way. She tried to weaponize the legal system against me. She tried to make me look like a dangerous person. She could have gotten me arrested, fired, blacklisted. And for what? Because her feelings were hurt? No. I wasn't going to quietly let that slide. The internet has a long memory, and I was fine with that. Months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved to a different city, started over somewhere new where people didn't know the story. Part of me wonders if she learned anything from it, if she ever felt bad about what she tried to do. But honestly, I don't think about her much anymore. What I think about is how close I came to being destroyed by something I didn't do, and how grateful I am that I had the skills and resources to fight back. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because trust me, these stories only get wilder from here. Where were we? Oh right, my ex thought she could bury me with fake evidence, but the internet has a long memory. And speaking of memories, sometimes karma doesn't wait for Reddit. Sometimes it plays out in front of the entire office. Now let's talk about workplace justice. Because nothing says Monday morning like your boss's affair popping up on every screen in the building. My boss had it out for me for months. I don't even know what I did to get on his bad side. But once I was there, everything I did was wrong. He'd write me up for being 2 minutes late, while other people strolled in 15 minutes after start time with zero consequences. He'd criticize my reports in meetings, nitpicking details he'd never mentioned before. He'd CC upper management on emails about minor mistakes, but never acknowledge when I did something well. It was exhausting. I felt like I was walking on eggshells every single day, just waiting for the next trap. Then one Friday afternoon, he called me into his office. No warning, no context. Just a meeting invite that popped up on my calendar 5 minutes before it started. I walked in and he didn't even look up from his computer. He said he was letting me go, effective immediately. Said I wasn't a culture fit, that the team needed someone who could adapt better to the company's vision. It was all corporate speak for absolutely nothing. I asked him what I'd done wrong, what I could have improved, and he just shrugged and said sometimes things don't work out. Then he told me to pack my desk and leave my badge and laptop with HR on the way out. I sat there for a second, stunned. I'd worked at this company for 3 years. I'd never had a bad performance review, until he became my manager 6 months ago. And now I was being fired with no real explanation, no severance discussion, nothing. I felt my throat tighten, but I refused to cry in front of him. I just nodded, stood up, and walked out. I went back to my desk in a daze and started putting my things in a box. My coworkers were staring, but nobody said anything. A few people gave me sympathetic looks. One person mouthed sorry. It was humiliating, and that's when I remembered something. I was the IT admin, or at least I had been until about 10 minutes ago. And in the chaos of being fired on the spot, nobody had revoked my access yet. I still had admin credentials to everything: the network, the servers, the cloud accounts, the meeting room display systems, everything. I kept packing my desk like nothing had changed, but my mind was racing. I went home, logged into my personal laptop, and accessed the company's back-end systems remotely. Still had full access. I started poking around, not really sure what I was looking for, just angry and wanting to understand why this had happened. And then I found it. My boss's personal cloud account was synced to his work email. I don't even think he realized it was connected, but it was. And it was a gold mine. Hundreds of messages between him and his assistant. Not work messages, personal ones, flirty ones, explicit ones. Photos I really wish I could unsee. Hotel receipts from business trips where they'd both coincidentally been out of the office on the same days. Calendar invites disguised as client meetings that were actually just blocked time for them to meet up. It was all right there, time-stamped and documented, a perfect trail of an affair he thought was hidden. I sat there staring at my screen, and something shifted. I wasn't sad anymore. I was calculated. He'd fired me for no reason, humiliated me in front of my colleagues, and was probably going to spin some story about my performance to cover his tracks. But I had something he didn't know I had, and I was going to use it. The company had an all-hands meeting every Monday morning. Everyone attended. The entire office crammed into the main conference room, and the overflow watched from smaller meeting rooms on the other floors. Every single meeting room had these big screens that displayed presentations, announcements, shared documents, whatever was queued up on the system, and I had admin access to all of them. I spent the weekend organizing everything. I created a slideshow, messages, photos, receipts, calendar invites, all of it. I made sure it was clear, easy to read, and impossible to misinterpret. Then I scheduled it to display on every single conference room screen in the building at 9 a.m. Monday morning, right when the all-hands meeting started. I set it to loop just in case anyone tried to shut it down, and then I logged out, deleted my remote access trail as best I could, and waited. Monday morning, I woke up to my phone exploding. Text messages from former coworkers, videos, screenshots, chaos. The slideshow had gone live exactly as planned. My boss had been standing at the front of the main conference room, about to start his presentation, when every screen in the building lit up with his affair. Messages between him and his assistant on the main screen behind him. Photos on the side monitors. Hotel receipts cycling through on the overflow room displays. Everyone saw it. The CEO, HR, his assistant who was also in the room, everyone. According to the videos people sent me, he went completely white. He tried to shut it down, fumbling with the remote control, but it wasn't responding because I'd locked the system. Someone from IT ran to manually disconnect the displays, but by that point, everyone had already seen enough. People were pulling out their phones, taking pictures, recording videos. His assistant apparently got up and left the room without saying a word. The CEO ended the meeting immediately and told everyone to go back to their desks. And here's where it gets absurd. By Monday afternoon, the videos had spread to the company's internal chat. People were sharing them in group messages, dissecting what they'd seen, speculating about how long the affair had been going on. HR locked down the chat and sent out a stern message about professionalism and confidentiality, but it was way too late. The damage was done. My boss was put on administrative leave that same day. His assistant was also suspended pending an investigation. But that wasn't even the worst part for him. Turns out, his assistant was married to someone who also worked at the company, in a completely different department, but still. When that person found out what had happened, through the videos that were now circulating everywhere, they went directly to HR and threatened to sue the company for creating a hostile work environment. The optics were a nightmare. The CEO was furious. By Wednesday morning, my former boss was officially terminated. His assistant was also let go, and the company was in full damage control mode, trying to figure out how to contain the situation before it turned into a PR disaster. I got a call from HR on Thursday. They wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss my termination. I almost laughed. I knew what this was. They knew I'd done it, or at least they strongly suspected, but they couldn't prove it. And more importantly, they didn't want to. Because if they acknowledged that I'd exposed my boss's affair, they'd have to acknowledge the affair itself, and that opened up a whole mess of liability issues they wanted to avoid. So instead, they offered me a settlement, a very generous settlement. 6 months of salary, a glowing reference letter, and an agreement that both parties would keep the details of my departure confidential. I took the deal, signed the paperwork on Friday, deposited the check the following Monday. I never admitted to anything, never confirmed I was the one who set up that slideshow. But I didn't have to. Everyone knew. My former co-workers still message me occasionally to tell me I'm a legend. A few people have bought me drinks when we've run into each other around town. One guy told me it was the most spectacular exit he'd ever witnessed, even though I wasn't even there to see it. Looking back, I don't regret it. He fired me for no reason, treated me like garbage for months, and thought he could just move on without consequences. But he underestimated me. He forgot that I had access, that I had knowledge, and that I had nothing left to lose. He thought he was untouchable. Turns out, he wasn't. The best part is I'm working at a better company now. Better pay, better boss, better culture. And every time I walk into a conference room and see those big display screens, I smile a little. Because I know exactly what kind of damage they can do when someone's not paying attention. Betrayal at work is one thing, but what about betrayal from the person who's supposed to have your back no matter what? I found out my best friend had been running a podcast about me completely by accident. A mutual friend sent me a link one Thursday afternoon with a message that just said, "Is this about you?" I clicked it without thinking much of it. The podcast was called something generic like Unfiltered Friendships, and the description promised real stories about modern drama and messy relationships. I hit play on the most recent episode, and within 30 seconds, I felt my stomach drop. She was telling my story, my breakup from 6 months ago, the one where I found out my ex had been cheating on me with someone from his gym. She described the whole thing in vivid detail, how I'd shown up at his apartment unannounced and caught them together, how I'd called her crying at 2 in the morning, how I'd spent weeks unable to get out of bed. She even mentioned the specific brand of ice cream I ate while sobbing on her couch. I kept listening, frozen in place. She moved on to another story, this one about a friend who struggled with anxiety and had a panic attack at a family wedding. That was me too. I remembered telling her about that night, how humiliated I felt, how my mom had to take me outside while I hyperventilated in the parking lot. She told it like it was some second-hand anecdote, but every detail was exact. The dress I wore, the song that was playing, the way my hands went numb. I scrolled through her previous episodes. There were dozens, and they were all me. My mental health struggles, my issues with my dad, the time I got fired from a job for calling out my boss's inappropriate behavior. My entire life, repackaged as content for strangers to consume on their morning commutes. I checked the stats, thousands of downloads per episode. She had sponsors, ads for therapy apps and wellness brands. She was making money off my trauma. I felt sick. I texted her immediately and asked if we could talk. She responded an hour later saying she was busy recording, but we could catch up tomorrow. Recording. She was probably recording another episode about me right now. When we finally met up, I asked her point blank if she'd started a podcast. She got this weird look on her face, somewhere between guilty and defensive, and said, yeah, she had. Said she thought it was a good creative outlet. I asked her if she realized she'd been telling my stories. She laughed it off. Said I was overreacting, that she never used my name. So technically it wasn't about me. That lots of people go through breakups and have anxiety. So it could be anyone. I stared at her in disbelief. I told her that anyone who knew me would know exactly who she was talking about. Our mutual friends definitely knew. She shrugged and said that wasn't her problem, that I should be flattered she found my life interesting enough to talk about. Flattered. She wanted me to be flattered that she'd monetize my pain without asking. I went home that night and didn't sleep. I just kept thinking about how many people had listened to those episodes, how many strangers now knew intimate details about the worst moments of my life, how she'd sat across from me dozens of times, listening to me cry and vent and trust her, and the whole time she was taking mental notes for her next upload. It felt like a violation I couldn't even fully articulate, and the worst part was she genuinely didn't think she'd done anything wrong. That's when I decided I was done playing nice. I went through our entire text history, years of conversations, and buried in there were dozens of voice notes she'd sent me over the months. I'd forgotten about most of them, but when I went back and listened, they were gold. Her talking about how she manipulated her boyfriend into paying for a vacation by pretending she was upset about something he didn't even do. Her bragging about lying to brands to get free products, saying she had way more followers than she actually did. Her laughing about scamming a small business out of a sponsorship by never posting the content she promised. Her admitting she'd hooked up with someone while her boyfriend was out of town and how easy it was to cover it up. It was all there. Her own words, her own voice, unfiltered and undeniable. I spent the next 2 days editing them together into a highlight reel. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. I just let her speak for herself. Then I sent it to 3 groups of people. First, the brands she was currently working with. I found their contact emails on their websites and sent a polite message saying I thought they should know who they were partnering with and attached the audio. Second, her boyfriend. I made a burner email and sent it to him with a subject line that just said, "You deserve to know the truth." And third, I posted it on Reddit. I found a subreddit about podcast drama and uploaded the whole thing with minimal context. Just said it was recordings from a podcaster who'd been using her friend's personal stories without permission, and here's what she's really like behind the scenes. The response was immediate. Within 24 hours, 2 of her sponsors dropped her. One of them even posted a statement on Instagram about not tolerating dishonesty and ending their partnership effective immediately. Her boyfriend called her, and I know this because she called me right after, screaming, asked me if I'd sent him something. I told her I had no idea what she was talking about, which was technically true since I used a burner email. She said someone sent him recordings of her talking about cheating, and now he'd broken up with her and moved out. She was sobbing, asking if I knew who would do something like that. I told her maybe it was karma. She hung up on me. The Reddit post blew up, thousands of upvotes. People were tagging her podcast account, leaving reviews calling her out. Her comment sections flooded with people asking if she got consent from the people in her stories. She tried to do damage control, posted an apology on her podcast feed about how she was sorry if anyone felt hurt by her content, and she'd be more mindful going forward. But it was too late. Her downloads tanked, her remaining sponsors pulled out, and the internet doesn't forget. She texted me a week later, a long message about how her life was falling apart, and she didn't understand why this was happening to her. How she'd lost her boyfriend, her income, her reputation, how people were being so cruel to her online. She said she thought we were best friends and asked if I could help her figure out who was behind the leaked recordings. I read the message 3 times and then I blocked her number. Here's the thing she still doesn't get. She thought she could take pieces of my life, repackage them as entertainment, and profit off my pain without consequences. She thought friendship meant she had unlimited access to my stories, that my trust was just material for her to mine whenever she needed content. And when I confronted her, she dismissed me, told me I was overreacting, made me feel crazy for being upset. So I gave her the same treatment. I took her words, her truth, and I shared it without her permission. I let the world see who she really was when she thought no one was listening. And just like she did to me, I didn't feel bad about it. The podcast is gone now. She deleted all the episodes and shut down the account. But the internet is forever, and people have already re-uploaded clips. Every now and then I'll see someone reference it in a thread about fake friends or podcasting ethics. And every time I do, I feel a little bit of satisfaction knowing that she finally understands what it feels like to have your privacy stripped away by someone you trusted. She still doesn't understand why I did it. She thinks I'm vindictive, that I overreacted, that what I did was worse than what she did. But that's the problem. She never thought she did anything wrong in the first place. You know what's worse than strangers knowing your secrets? Finding out your own husband has been keeping a folder full of photos that make you question everything. I was using my husband's laptop because mine was updating and I needed to check my email. He told me 100 times to just use his whenever I needed it, so I didn't think twice about logging in. I was searching for a document I'd sent myself when I accidentally clicked on a folder I'd never noticed before. It was tucked away in his files, labeled Archive. I almost closed it, figured it was just old work stuff, but something made me pause. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was instinct. Either way, I opened it. Inside were hundreds of photos, and every single one of them was of a woman who looked almost exactly like me. Same dark hair, same length, same build, same style of clothing. She even had the same kind of glasses I used to wear in college. For a second, I thought maybe these were old photos of me that he'd somehow gotten, but the backgrounds were wrong. The clothes were different. The settings were places I'd never been. I kept scrolling, my chest getting tighter with every image. Beach photos, candid shots at dinner, pictures of her laughing in someone's backyard. She looked so much like me it was unsettling, like looking at a version of myself from another dimension. I felt sick. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop scrolling. The photos were old, dated years before I'd even met my husband. Some had metadata showing they were from almost a decade ago. I kept digging deeper into the folder. Underneath the photos were text message screenshots, conversations between him and this woman, inside jokes, plans for dates, messages that said, "I love you and I can't wait to marry you." Then I found the love letters, actual scanned handwritten letters, the kind people don't really write anymore. They were tender and intimate and full of promises about the future. And then I found the wedding invitation. Elegant script on cream-colored cardstock, his name next to hers, a date from 8 years ago, a venue I'd never heard him mention. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. My husband had been married before. He'd never told me. Not once in the 3 years we'd been together had he ever mentioned an ex-wife, a previous marriage, anything. I'd asked him about past relationships early on, the way you do when you're getting serious with someone, and he'd mentioned a few ex-girlfriends but said nothing had ever been that serious. He'd lied, and this woman, whoever she was, looked so much like me that it couldn't be a coincidence. I heard his car pull into the driveway. I should have closed the laptop, should have taken time to think about how to approach this, but I was too angry, too confused, too hurt. When he walked through the door, I was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open in front of me. He saw my face and knew immediately something was wrong. He asked what happened and I just turned the screen toward him. He went pale, didn't say anything for a few seconds, just stood there staring at the folder like he'd seen a ghost. Then he broke down. Not angry, not defensive. He just crumpled. He sat down across from me and started talking, and I didn't interrupt because I needed to hear all of it. He said her name was Sarah. They'd met in college, dated for years, got married right after graduation. He said she was his first love, his best friend, everything he'd ever wanted, and 3 weeks into their honeymoon, she was killed in a car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit them head-on. He survived with minor injuries. She didn't make it to the hospital. He said he spent years in therapy trying to move on, that he'd packed away everything that reminded him of her because it was too painful to look at. He moved to a new city, started over, tried to build a life that didn't revolve around grief, and then he met me. He said the first time he saw me, it took his breath away because I looked so much like her, but he swore it wasn't why he pursued me. He said he got to know me and fell in love with who I was, not who I reminded him of. He said he didn't tell me about Sarah because he was terrified I'd think I was just a replacement, a substitute for someone he couldn't have anymore. But that wasn't even the worst part. When I asked him point blank if the resemblance was a coincidence, he hesitated. And in that hesitation, I got my answer. He admitted that he'd been drawn to me initially because I looked like her. That when he first saw me at that coffee shop 3 years ago, it felt like fate because I had her smile, her mannerisms, her energy. He said over time he fell in love with me for me, but he couldn't deny that the physical similarities were what caught his attention first. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said he was sorry for not being honest, that he knew how this looked, but he loved me and didn't want to lose me. I didn't know what to say. Part of me understood grief. I understood wanting to hold on to something, someone who you'd lost. But another part of me felt like our entire relationship had been built on a lie. Like every time he looked at me, he was seeing someone else. Like I'd been cast in a role I didn't audition for. I asked him if he ever called me by her name in his head. He said no. I asked him if he compared us. He said sometimes, early on, but not anymore. I asked him if he would have even noticed me if I didn't look like her. He didn't answer that one. I told him I needed space. He nodded and said he'd stay with a friend for a few days. He packed a bag and left that night, and I sat alone in our apartment, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with this information. I kept going back to the laptop, scrolling through those photos, reading those letters, looking at this woman who wore my face but lived a completely different life. It was like staring into a mirror that reflected someone else's past. I felt like a replacement, like a stand-in, like I'd been chosen not because of who I was, but because of who I resembled. The next few days were a blur. Friends told me I should leave, that it was creepy, that he clearly hadn't moved on. Others said grief was complicated, and maybe he deserved a chance to explain himself fully. My therapist said I needed to decide whether I could live with the fact that our relationship had started because I reminded him of someone he lost. She asked me if I believed he loved me for me now, even if that wasn't how it started. I didn't have an answer. He's been calling and texting, asking if we can talk. I haven't responded yet. I don't know if I can stay with someone who saw me as a ghost of someone else. I don't know if I can trust that when he says he loves me, he's talking to me and not the memory of her. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at him without wondering if he's seeing her face instead of mine. I found those photos 2 weeks ago, and I still don't know what to do. Part of me wants to believe that love can start in messy ways and still become real. Part of me feels like I deserve someone who chose me because I'm me, not because I happen to look like someone they'd lost. I'm still sitting with it, still trying to figure out if this is something I can forgive or if it's something I need to walk away from. The folder is still on his laptop. I haven't deleted it. I don't think I could even if I wanted to. It's evidence of a whole life I didn't know existed. A whole person I've apparently been living in the shadow of without even knowing it. And I don't know how to move forward from that. Some secrets are buried in folders, others are buried in the past. And sometimes they're hidden in letters you were never supposed to find. I was helping my mum clean out the attic on a random Saturday afternoon. She'd been talking about doing it for years, saying there was too much junk up there and she needed to sort through everything before it became my problem when she was gone. I told her she was being dramatic, but I showed up anyway with garbage bags and boxes. We'd been at it for a couple hours, pulling out old Christmas decorations and clothes from the 80s, when I found a cardboard box shoved in the corner behind some storage bins. It was taped shut and labeled personal in my mum's handwriting. I almost tossed it in the keep pile without looking, but something made me pause. I asked her what was in it. She looked up from across the attic, saw what I was holding, and her face went completely white. She told me to put it back, that it was nothing, just old paperwork, but the way she said it made me curious. I've known my mum my whole life, and I'd never seen her react like that. So I opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, bundled with rubber bands. There were baby photos, the old kind with the white borders and dates stamped on the back. And underneath everything was a birth certificate for a boy named Daniel, born when my mum was 19 years old. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I was 32. I'd never heard this name, never seen these photos. My mum was across the attic now, standing completely still, staring at me like I'd just found something I wasn't supposed to. I asked her who Daniel was. She didn't answer right away. Just stood there with her arms crossed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Finally, she told me to put the box down and come downstairs. We needed to talk. My heart was pounding. I followed her down to the kitchen and we sat at the table in silence for what felt like forever. Then she started talking. She told me that when she was 19, before she met my dad, she got pregnant. The father was a guy she'd been dating in college who disappeared the second she told him. Her parents were furious. This was the early 70s, and being a single mother wasn't something her family could accept. They gave her two options: keep the baby and figure it out on her own, or give him up for adoption and move on with her life. She chose adoption, said it was the hardest decision she ever made, but she thought it was the right thing to do at the time. She told me it was a closed adoption. She signed the papers, held him once, and never saw him again. She wasn't allowed to know where he went or who adopted him. That was the deal. She met my dad a few years later, they got married, and when I was born, she tried to move forward and not look back. She said she thought about Daniel every single day, but convinced herself he was better off without her, that he had a good family who could give him the life she couldn't. She kept the box hidden because it was all she had left of him. Photos from the hospital, letters she wrote to him over the years that she never sent, and his birth certificate. She never told my dad, never told me, never told anyone. I sat there trying to process what I just heard. I had a brother, a whole person who existed out there somewhere, who I'd never known about. I asked her if she ever tried to find him. She said no, that it wouldn't be fair to disrupt his life after all this time, that he probably didn't even know he was adopted, and she didn't want to be the one to turn his world upside down. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me understood. Part of me was angry she'd kept this from me my whole life. I went home that night and couldn't stop thinking about it. Over the next few weeks, I became obsessed. I kept thinking about Daniel, wondering who he was, where he was, if he looked like us. I started researching adoption registries, DNA websites, forums for people looking for birth families. I uploaded my DNA to one of those ancestry sites just to see what would happen, and then I waited. 3 months later, I got a notification, a close family match. I opened it and there he was, Daniel. His profile said he'd been looking for biological family for years. He lived 3 states away, worked as a teacher, and had uploaded his DNA hoping to find answers. I stared at his profile picture for an hour. He looked just like me. Same eyes, same nose, same slightly crooked smile. It was surreal. I messaged him, told him I thought we might be half-siblings and explained what I knew. He responded within an hour. He said he'd known he was adopted his whole life and had been searching for his birth mother for over a decade. He asked if I knew her name. I told him. He went quiet for a while and then asked if we could meet. I said yes. And here's where it gets absurd. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our cities. The second I saw him walk in, I knew. It wasn't just the physical resemblance, it was something deeper. He sat down and we just stared at each other for a minute before either of us said anything. Then we talked for hours. He told me about his life, his adoptive parents who he loved but who couldn't answer the questions he'd always had about where he came from. He told me he'd spent years wondering why his birth mother gave him up, if she ever thought about him, if she regretted it. I told him everything I knew. About the box in the attic, about her being 19 and scared, about how she'd kept his things all these years. He didn't react the way I expected. He wasn't relieved or grateful. He was angry. He said if she cared so much, why didn't she ever look for him? Why did she let him spend 30 years wondering if she even remembered he existed? I tried to explain that it was complicated, that she thought she was doing the right thing, but he wasn't hearing it. He said she made a choice to walk away, and now she didn't get to decide when or if they had a relationship. He wanted to meet her, but only so he could tell her exactly how much damage her silence had caused. I made the mistake of telling my mom I'd found him. I thought she'd be happy. I thought maybe this could be a chance for them to reconnect and heal. I was wrong. She was furious, said I had no right to go behind her back and contact him, that I'd opened a door she'd spent decades keeping closed, and now she didn't know how to deal with it. She said I'd betrayed her trust and put her in an impossible position. I tried to explain that he deserved to know, that he'd been looking for her, that this was his story too. She didn't care. She said some things can't be undone, and I'd just proven that. Then came the breaking point. I arranged for them to meet. I thought if they could just sit down and talk, maybe they could work through it. Daniel agreed, reluctantly. My mum refused at first, but eventually she said yes. We met at a park, neutral ground. The second she saw him, her face crumpled. She started crying before he even said a word. He didn't hug her, didn't smile, just looked at her and asked why. Why did she give him up? Why did she never look for him? Why did she let him grow up thinking he wasn't wanted? She tried to explain, tried to tell him she thought about him every day, that she kept his things, that giving him up was the hardest thing she'd ever done. He said that wasn't good enough, that thinking about someone wasn't the same as fighting for them, that she had decades to reach out and chose not to. The conversation ended with him walking away and her sobbing on a bench. I stood there between them, feeling like I'd just made everything worse. Now I have a brother who wants nothing to do with our mum, and a mum who won't forgive me for finding him. We're all stuck in this place where nobody's happy, and I don't know how to fix it. Daniel texts me sometimes. We've grabbed drinks a few times. He's a good guy, but every time we talk, I can feel this resentment under the surface. Not at me, but at her, at the situation, at the years he lost. My mum won't talk about him. If I bring it up, she shuts down or changes the subject. It's like she wants to go back to pretending he doesn't exist. But she can't, because now I know. Now he knows. Now it's real. I don't regret finding him. He deserved to know where he came from. But I do regret thinking it would be simple, that everyone would just be grateful and move forward. Life doesn't work like that. Some doors, once you open them, you can't close again, and sometimes the truth doesn't set anyone free. It just makes everything more complicated. If finding out about a secret sibling is complicated, imagine finding out at your brother's wedding that the groom has a very specific Freudian slip. My brother's wedding was supposed to be perfect. He'd been planning it for over a year. The venue was this beautiful garden estate with string lights everywhere and flowers that probably cost more than my car. Everyone was dressed up, the weather was incredible, and you could just feel how happy everyone was. My brother looked amazing in his suit, standing up there at the altar, waiting for his soon-to-be husband to finish his vows. Everything felt like it was straight out of a movie. The groom had written his own vows. He was reading them off a little card, voice shaking because he was emotional. He talked about the moment they met, about how he knew from the first date that this was it, about all the little things he loved. It was sweet. People were tearing up. My mum was fully crying in the front row. And then he got to the end of his vows, looked my brother right in the eyes, and said, "I can't wait to spend forever with you, Emily." The room went dead silent, like someone had hit mute on the entire wedding. My brother's name is Jason. Emily is the groom's ex-girlfriend, the ex he dated for 3 years before they met, the ex he claimed he was completely over. My brother's face went from glowing and happy to completely red in about 2 seconds. You could see him processing it in real time, confused, then hurt, then angry. The groom realized what he'd said and his eyes went wide. He started stammering, saying he was nervous, that he'd been up all night and barely slept, that it was just a slip of the tongue and didn't mean anything. He reached for my brother's hand, but my brother pulled away. The officiant looked like he wanted to disappear. Guests were frozen in their seats. Nobody knew what to do. My brother just stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the groom. Then he turned and walked off the altar. Didn't run, didn't make a scene, just walked. Straight down the aisle, past all the guests, and out of the venue. The groom called after him, but he didn't stop. The groom stood there for a second, looking like he might chase after him, but one of the groomsmen grabbed his arm and pulled him to the side. The officiant awkwardly announced that we were taking a brief pause, and everyone should head to the cocktail hour. But nobody moved. People just sat there whispering to each other, looking around trying to figure out what was happening. The photographer was standing off to the side with her camera down, clearly trying to decide if she should still be there. I went after my brother, found him in the parking lot, leaning against his car, just staring at the ground. I asked if he was okay, which was a stupid question because obviously he wasn't. He said he didn't know what to do, that he couldn't go back in there, that everyone had just watched him get humiliated at his own wedding. I told him he didn't have to go back, that we could leave, that I'd handle whatever needed handling. But he shook his head and said he needed to think. Meanwhile, back at the venue, things were falling apart. The groom was apparently in the bathroom crying. His best man was trying to do damage control, telling people it was just nerves, that everyone makes mistakes, that they'd work it out. But you could tell nobody was buying it. My mum was furious. She marched over to the groom's parents and had words with them. I don't know exactly what she said, but his mom started crying too. The reception was supposed to start in an hour. The caterers were setting up. The DJ was doing sound checks. The cake was already displayed. But there was no wedding party, no groom, and definitely no other groom. Guests started leaving. Some people went up to the hotel rooms they'd booked. Others just got in their cars and drove home. It was the most awkward thing I've ever witnessed. That's when everything unraveled. My brother came back inside, but not to reconcile. He went straight to the bridal suite, which I guess is just called the wedding suite when it's two grooms, and started grabbing his stuff. He was packing his bag for the honeymoon that clearly wasn't happening anymore when he saw the iPad sitting on the table. It was the groom's iPad, the one he used for planning. My brother said he wasn't trying to snoop, but the screen was already on, and there were text messages pulled up. Messages to Emily, from that week, from the day before the wedding. The groom had been texting her saying he wasn't sure he was ready, that he kept thinking about her, that he didn't know if he was making a mistake. She'd been telling him to call it off if he wasn't sure, but he kept saying he couldn't, that everything was already planned, that he did love Jason, but he was just confused. The last message was from that morning, hours before the ceremony. He'd told her he was going through with it, but he wished things were different. My brother screenshotted everything and sent it to himself. Then he walked out of the suite, found the groom who was now sitting in the hallway with his head in his hands, and told him it was over. The groom tried to explain, tried to say the messages didn't mean what they looked like, that he was just scared and Emily was familiar and he'd made a mistake reaching out to her. My brother cut him off, said he'd just called him by her name in front of 200 people and had been texting her all week about having doubts. There was nothing to explain. The groom started full-on sobbing, begging him not to do this, saying they could go to therapy, that they could work through it, that he wanted to marry him. My brother looked at him and said, "If you wanted to marry me, you would have said my name." Then he walked out. The marriage lasted 4 hours. That's how long it was between the scheduled ceremony time and my brother officially calling it off. They'd been together for 5 years, engaged for 1, and it all fell apart because the groom couldn't let go of his ex and said her name at the worst possible moment. The venue still charged them for everything. The food, the flowers, the music, all of it. They'd signed a contract and it wasn't the venue's fault the wedding imploded. My brother didn't even fight it. He just paid his half and moved on. The groom apparently tried to get him to talk for weeks afterward, sent long emails, showed up at his apartment, called me and our mum asking us to convince him to give him another chance. My brother blocked him on everything. A few months later, I heard through mutual friends that the groom and Emily were dating again. So I guess he got what he actually wanted, and my brother dodged the biggest bullet of his life. He's doing better now, moved to a new city, started fresh, met someone who actually says his name correctly, but he still doesn't talk about the wedding. None of us do. It's just this thing that happened that we all collectively pretend didn't. The photographer sent him the pictures anyway. He burned them. You almost have to admire the level of self-sabotage it takes to say your ex's name during your wedding vows. Public humiliation is brutal. But you know what's worse? Private sabotage from someone you see every single day at the office. A coworker had been making my life miserable for months. It started small. She'd take credit for ideas I'd pitched in meetings, rephrasing them just enough to make it sound like they were hers. She'd volunteer me for projects without asking, then tell our boss I'd agreed to take them on. She spread little comments around the office, nothing I could directly confront her about, but enough that people started looking at me differently. I'd overhear her in the break room talking about how stressed I seemed, how I was struggling to keep up, how she was worried about me. It was all framed as concern, but it was poison. Slowly, methodically, she was turning people against me. I couldn't prove any of it. She was too smart to leave evidence. It was all verbal, all plausibly deniable. When I tried to push back or correct the record, I looked defensive. When I stayed quiet, the narrative she was building went unchallenged. I felt trapped. I started keeping my head down, doing my work, avoiding her as much as possible. But the damage was done. People treated me differently. I wasn't getting invited to team lunches anymore. My ideas were dismissed in meetings. I felt isolated in a place I used to enjoy working. Then, one day, everything changed. We were in a department meeting and she was sitting across from me, half paying attention, scrolling on her phone under the table. I wasn't trying to snoop, but from my angle I could see her screen. She was on Reddit. I recognized the interface, the layout. And then I saw the username. It was distinctive, kind of quirky, and it triggered something in my memory. A few weeks earlier, someone had sent me a link to a Reddit post on a workplace drama subreddit. It was a story about a nightmare coworker who was incompetent, emotionally unstable, and making everyone's job harder. The details were vague enough that it could have been about anyone, but specific enough that I'd felt a weird sense of familiarity reading it. I'd brushed it off at the time, figured it was just a coincidence. But now, seeing that username on her phone, I realized it wasn't a coincidence at all. I waited until I got home that night and pulled up Reddit on my laptop. I searched for the username I'd seen on her screen, found her account immediately, and then I started reading. My stomach turned. Her entire post history was about me, months of posts across different subreddits. She'd been documenting every mistake I made, every awkward social interaction, every moment where I stumbled or hesitated. She painted me as this incompetent, unstable person who couldn't handle basic tasks. She exaggerated situations, twisted context, made me sound like a liability. Commenters were sympathizing with her, telling her she should report me to HR, that I sounded like a nightmare to work with. She was building a public case against me, and I'd had no idea. I kept scrolling. The posts went back almost a year. Some of them had thousands of upvotes. She'd gone viral multiple times complaining about me. People were recognizing her username, asking for updates, treating this like an ongoing saga. She was eating up the attention, posting more and more frequently, each story more dramatic than the last. I felt sick reading it. This wasn't just office gossip. This was a calculated campaign to destroy my reputation, and she was doing it for internet points. But then I found something else. Mixed in with the posts about me were other stories. Posts where she admitted to fudging her timesheets, clocking in from home when she was actually running errands. Posts where she bragged about taking long lunches and charging them as client meetings. Posts where she trashed our boss, called him incompetent, said she was smarter than half the leadership team and could run circles around them if she wanted to. She'd been sloppy. In her eagerness to vent and get validation from strangers, she'd confessed to violating company policy over and over again. I started taking screenshots, every post about faking timesheets, every post about bad-mouthing our boss, every post where she admitted to things that would get her fired if HR knew. I organized them chronologically, redacted any identifying information about myself, and compiled them into a clean, easy-to-read document. Then I created a burner email account and sent everything to HR anonymously. No personal commentary, no accusations. Just the screenshots with a brief note saying I thought they should be aware of what was being posted publicly by someone in the company. Things moved fast after that. HR launched an investigation within days. I don't know exactly what happened behind closed doors, but I started noticing changes. She was called into meetings with HR multiple times. She looked stressed, paranoid. She stopped posting on Reddit entirely. Her account went dark. Then, about a week after I'd sent the email, she was gone. Just didn't show up to work one day. Her desk was cleared out by the end of the week. No official announcement, just a quiet exit. Our boss sent an email saying she'd decided to pursue other opportunities and wishing her well. Everyone knew that was code for she got fired. People asked me if I knew what happened. I said I had no idea, and technically I didn't. I didn't know the specifics of the HR investigation or what exactly they'd found. All I knew was that I'd given them the information and they'd acted on it. I never told anyone it was me who sent it. Never bragged, never hinted, never even felt the need to. The satisfaction of watching her face the consequences of her own actions was enough. The office changed after she left. People started treating me normally again. The weird tension that had been building for months just evaporated. I got invited to lunches again. My ideas were actually heard in meetings. It was like a fog had lifted. I realized how much of the toxicity had been coming directly from her, and how much easier everything became once she was gone. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. A few months later, I got a message request on LinkedIn. It was from her. She'd apparently landed a new job and wanted to reach out. The message was long and weirdly friendly. She said she'd been doing a lot of reflecting since leaving and realized she hadn't always been the best coworker. She said she hoped there were no hard feelings and that she wished me well. It was bizarre. I don't know if she ever figured out that I was the one who sent those screenshots to HR, or if she just assumed it was random bad luck that her Reddit post got discovered. Either way, I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. I still think about it sometimes, how she spent months tearing me down, turning people against me, documenting my every failure for strangers on the internet. How she thought she was untouchable because it was all anonymous. How she got so comfortable in her cruelty that she started confessing to actual policy violations in the same space. She gave me everything I needed to take her down, and she didn't even realize it. I didn't ruin her. She ruined herself. I just made sure the right people saw it. Coworkers can be ruthless. But what about when the person you trust most starts lying about a trip you thought was innocent? My girlfriend told me she was going on a girls' trip to Nashville. She'd been planning it for weeks with her college friends, talking about how excited she was to get away and blow off some steam. I was supportive, told her to have fun, be safe, send pictures. She left on a Friday morning and I dropped her off at the airport, kissed her goodbye, told her I'd miss her. The whole thing felt normal, routine even. All weekend she sent me photos, group shots at brunch spots, videos of them on Broadway with neon lights and live music in the background, pictures of matching cowboy boots they'd bought as a joke. She seemed happy. I was happy for her. Sunday night she texted saying she'd landed and was grabbing an Uber home. I was already in bed when she got back. She slipped in quietly, kissed my forehead, and said she was exhausted. I asked how it was and she said amazing, that she missed me and that she'd tell me all about it tomorrow. Then she passed out next to me. Monday morning I was making coffee when I grabbed her jacket to hang it up. I felt something crumpled in the pocket. I pulled it out without thinking. It was a receipt, hotel reservation, printed confirmation for a room at some boutique place in Nashville. 1 king bed, 2 guests, check-in Friday, check-out Sunday. Her name was on it, and next to hers was a man's name I didn't recognize. My brain stalled for a second. I read it again. Definitely a king bed. Definitely 2 guests. Definitely not a girl's trip set up. I walked into the bedroom where she was still asleep and just stood there holding the receipt, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the hotel messed up the reservation. Maybe one of her friends had a boyfriend who came last minute, and they had to share a room for some reason. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but my gut was screaming at me that something was off. When she woke up, I asked her about it casually. Said I found a receipt in her jacket and was confused because it looked like it was for a room with a king bed. She barely looked at it, just laughed and said the hotel must have printed the wrong thing, that they all had separate rooms, and it was probably just a system error. She said it so easily, so confidently, that I almost believed her. Almost. But I couldn't let it go. That afternoon, after she left for work, I called the hotel. I told them I was trying to confirm a reservation from the previous weekend and gave them her name and the dates. The woman on the phone pulled it up immediately. She confirmed everything. 1 room, 1 king bed, 2 guests. Checked in under my girlfriend's name and the name from the receipt. No other rooms under her name, no group booking, just the one. I thanked her and hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. She'd lied, directly to my face, not even hesitated, and the photos she'd sent all weekend, the ones with her friends, were they even real? Or had she just staged a few shots to cover her tracks while spending the rest of the time with whoever this guy was? I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more information. I needed to know who this person was and what exactly had been going on. So I waited. I acted normal. Asked about her day, made dinner, watched TV with her like nothing had changed. But inside I was spiraling, replaying every moment from the past few months, looking for signs I'd missed. A week went by. She started acting different, more distant. She'd check her phone constantly and angle it away from me. She'd go to bed early or stay up late on her laptop. When I tried to initiate any kind of intimacy, she'd say she was tired or stressed about work. The warmth between us evaporated, and I could feel her pulling away. I still didn't say anything. I just watched and waited. Then came the breaking point. I got a DM on Instagram from someone I didn't know, a woman. Her message said, "I think we need to talk about your girlfriend and my boyfriend." My stomach dropped. She sent me screenshots, text messages between my girlfriend and this guy, months of them, flirty messages that escalated into plans to meet up, references to the Nashville trip, him saying he couldn't wait to have her all to himself for the weekend, her saying she told me it was a girls' trip and I had no idea. There were older messages too, from before Nashville. Late night conversations, photos. It had been going on for at least 4 months. I messaged the woman back and we compared notes. Her boyfriend was the guy from the receipt. She'd found the text on his phone a few days ago and had been doing her own digging. She'd seen my girlfriend's Instagram tagged in some of his photos from months back and put the pieces together. We talked for over an hour, laying out timelines, cross-referencing stories our partners had told us. Everything matched. They'd been seeing each other behind both our backs, coordinating lies, and the Nashville trip had been their chance to spend a full weekend together without suspicion. I felt numb, not even angry yet, just hollow. This person I'd trusted, who I'd been planning a future with, had been living a double life for months, and she'd been so good at it. So careful. If it weren't for a crumpled receipt and this other woman reaching out, I might never have known. I didn't want a big confrontation, didn't want to give her a chance to spin more lies or beg for forgiveness. I just wanted out. So the following Saturday, when she texted me that she was at brunch with the same friends from the Nashville trip, I sent her a message. I told her I knew about Nashville. I knew about the hotel room. I knew about him. I attached the receipt, the screenshots from his girlfriend, and a timeline of every lie she'd told. Then I said we were done. I'd already moved my stuff out of our apartment that morning while she was gone. My name was off the lease as of next month. I didn't want to see her or talk to her again. She called immediately. I didn't answer. She called 6 more times, sent a flood of texts, asking what I was talking about, saying it was a misunderstanding, then admitting it happened but saying it didn't mean anything, then begging me to let her explain. I blocked her number, blocked her on everything. Her friends started reaching out, saying I was being cruel, that I should at least hear her out, that everyone makes mistakes. I told them they could believe whatever version of events she fed them, but I had the receipts and I was done. A few of them backed off. One of them actually apologized and said she had no idea that my girlfriend had lied to all of them too about what really happened in Nashville. The guy's girlfriend broke up with him the same day I ended things. We checked in with each other a few times over the next couple weeks, just to make sure we were both okay. It was surreal bonding with a stranger over the fact that our partners had betrayed us together, but in a weird way it helped. We both knew the truth, and we both knew we weren't crazy for walking away. My ex tried to reach out a few more times through mutual friends, sent letters to my new address, left voicemails on my work phone, but I never responded. There was nothing she could say that would change what she did. No explanation that would make the lying okay. She'd made her choices and now she had to live with the consequences. Looking back, the worst part wasn't even the cheating. It was how easy it was for her to lie. How she looked me in the eyes and smiled while feeding me a story she knew was false. How she built an entire fake weekend just to cover her tracks. That level of deception doesn't happen overnight. It takes practice, and that means she'd probably been lying to me about a lot more than just Nashville. I'm doing better now, moved into my own place, started seeing a therapist to work through the trust issues this whole thing left me with, and I learned to trust my gut, because that receipt didn't feel right from the second I saw it, and I was correct. If something feels off, it probably is. She never saw the breakup coming, thought she had everything under control, thought I'd never find out, but hidden things have a way of surfacing eventually, and when they do, there's no going back. Hidden receipts are one thing, but hidden cameras in your own bedroom, that's a whole different level of violation. I was cleaning our bedroom on a Saturday afternoon, the kind of deep clean where you move furniture and dust places you normally ignore. I'd pulled the chair over to wipe down the smoke detector on the ceiling when I noticed something odd. There was a tiny lens inside it. At first I thought maybe it was just part of the detector, some kind of sensor I'd never noticed before. But when I looked closer, I realized it was a camera. An actual camera, hidden inside the smoke detector, pointed directly at our bed. My stomach dropped. I felt this wave of nausea wash over me, and I almost fell off the chair. I unscrewed the detector from the ceiling with shaking hands and found a small device tucked inside, still recording. There was a little SD card slot and a blinking light indicating it was on. I sat on the edge of the bed holding this thing, trying to process what I was looking at. Someone had put a camera in our bedroom. Someone had been watching me, watching us. I grabbed my laptop and started searching for how these things work. Turned out this model connects to a cloud account where all the footage gets uploaded automatically. I found the device's IP address and traced it to an account. The login screen popped up and I tried a few common passwords, getting locked out twice before I stopped. I needed to think. I needed to figure out who had access to our apartment, who could have installed this, and how long it had been there. I called my partner immediately. They were at work, but I told them to come home right now, that it was an emergency. They sounded worried, asking if I was okay, if something happened. I just said they needed to get home. When they walked through the door 20 minutes later, I was sitting on the couch with the smoke detector disassembled on the coffee table in front of me. I asked them if they knew what it was. They looked confused, picked it up, examined it, and said it looked like our smoke detector. I pointed to the camera lens. Their face went pale. They immediately said it wasn't theirs, started asking where I found it, how long it had been there, if I'd called the police yet. They said maybe the landlord put it there, that maybe it was some kind of security thing we didn't know about. But that didn't make sense. I'd lived in this apartment for 3 years before they moved in. If the landlord had installed cameras, I would have noticed by then. And why would a landlord put a camera inside a bedroom? It didn't add up. I told them I was filing a police report. They agreed that was the right thing to do, said they'd come with me to the station. We went that afternoon and explained the situation to the officer at the desk. They took the camera as evidence and said they'd have their tech team look into it, see if they could trace where the footage was being stored and who had access. They told us it could take a few days, but they'd be in touch. Those few days were the longest of my life. I couldn't sleep in that bedroom. I kept imagining someone watching me, recording me, seeing the most private moments of my life. I stayed at a friend's place and my partner said they understood, that they'd stay at the apartment in case the police needed anything. Every time my phone rang, I jumped, thinking it was the detectives with answers. Then I got the call. The detective asked if I could come down to the station alone. Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. I went by myself and he sat me down in one of those sterile interview rooms. He told me they'd traced the cloud account linked to the camera. It was registered to an email address. My partner's email address. The account had been active for 8 months. There were weeks of recording stored. Me getting dressed, sleeping, everything. All uploaded to an account my partner controlled. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. I asked if they were sure, if there was any possibility it was a mistake. The detective showed me the account registration, the email confirmations, the login history. It was all there, all linked directly to them. I sat there trying to make sense of it, trying to find some explanation that wasn't what it obviously was. But there wasn't one. I drove back to the apartment in a daze. When I walked in, my partner was sitting on the couch like nothing had happened. I told them the police had traced the account, told them I knew it was theirs. They didn't deny it this time. They just sat there, quiet, staring at the floor. Then they started trying to explain, said they'd installed it a few months after they moved in because they traveled for work a lot and wanted to feel close to me when they were gone. That it helped them feel connected, that it wasn't creepy, it was just their way of coping with the distance. I asked them if they seriously thought secretly recording me without my knowledge or consent was a normal way to feel connected. They said I was overreacting. That couples do stuff like this all the time, that it wasn't a big deal because we were together, so it wasn't like they were a stranger. I felt like I was in a nightmare. This person I'd been living with, sharing a bed with, trusting, had been watching me for months without telling me, and now they were trying to make me feel like I was the one being unreasonable for being upset about it. Things went from bad to unhinged. I told them I was leaving. They started panicking, saying we could talk about it, that they'd delete everything, that they'd never do it again. I said it didn't matter, that the trust was gone, that I couldn't be with someone who thought violating my privacy was acceptable. They got defensive, started raising their voice, saying I was being dramatic and that I was throwing away our relationship over nothing. I grabbed my keys and my phone and walked out, stayed at my friend's place again that night. The next morning, I went back with 2 friends, while my partner was at work and packed all my stuff. I took everything that was mine and left. I didn't leave a note, didn't say goodbye, just got out. Then I went straight to the courthouse and filed for a restraining order. The judge granted it based on the police report and the evidence. My partner was served the papers 2 days later. They tried to contact me anyway, called from different numbers, sent emails, showed up at my new place once before the restraining order kicked in. I documented everything and reported it. They finally stopped after their lawyer told them they were making things worse for themselves. I haven't heard from them in months now, but I still don't feel safe. I check every smoke detector, every outlet, every corner of whatever space I'm in. I cover my laptop camera. I'm hyper aware of everything around me in a way I never was before. My therapist says it's a normal response to what happened, that it'll get better with time, but right now it doesn't feel like it will. It feels like that camera stole something from me I can't get back. The ability to feel secure in my own space. The ability to trust that the person I'm with actually respects me. The belief that privacy is a given and not something I have to constantly defend. The worst part is they still don't think they did anything wrong. In their mind, I'm the one who overreacted. I'm the one who ruined everything by making a big deal out of it. And that, more than anything, tells me I made the right choice leaving. Because someone who can justify that level of violation will justify anything. Trust is hard to rebuild after something like that, but sometimes the betrayal doesn't come from a partner. It comes from someone you thought was just a nosy neighbor. My neighbor had been a problem since the day they moved in. At first, it was small stuff, passive-aggressive comments about my dog barking, even though my dog barely made noise and was inside most of the day. Complaints about where I parked my car on the street, which was completely legal and not blocking anything. Then it escalated to criticisms about my holiday decorations, my lawn care, the color of my mailbox. Anything they could find to complain about, they did. I tried to be friendly at first, tried to address their concerns, but nothing I did was ever good enough. They just seemed to hate me for existing next door to them. Then, one day, I got a letter from the HOA, a formal violation notice. According to the complaint, I'd made illegal modifications to my property without approval. The letter included photos as evidence. I stared at them confused because I hadn't modified anything. The photos showed my fence with what looked like an added extension, and my backyard shed with an extra section that didn't exist. I walked outside to double-check, thinking maybe I was losing my mind. Nope. My fence and shed looked exactly the way they always had. These photos were fake. I looked closer at the images. The Photoshop job was terrible. The lighting was off, the perspective was wrong, and the timestamp on one of the photos didn't even match the metadata. Someone had clearly doctored these images and submitted them to the HOA to get me in trouble, and I had a pretty good idea who that someone was. Here's the thing about my house, I have a doorbell camera, and because of the way my driveway is angled, it doesn't just capture my front door, it also captures a pretty clear view of my neighbor's driveway and part of their yard. I'd installed it for security after some package thefts in the neighborhood a year ago, and I'd never really thought much about what else it might be recording. Until now. I went back through weeks of footage, and what I found was incredible. There was my neighbor late at night, walking up to my car with keys in hand, keying a long scratch down the side. There they were again a few days later, dumping a bag of trash on my front lawn and then quickly walking back to their house. I watched them steal packages off my porch on 3 separate occasions. I had everything. Time-stamped, high-definition, undeniable evidence of harassment and petty crime. But that wasn't even the worst part. While I was scrolling through the footage, I noticed something else. In the background of several clips, you could see their backyard, and sitting there clear as day was a shed. A big one, way bigger than what the HOA allows without a permit. I checked the HOA guidelines just to be sure. Any structure over a certain size requires architectural approval and a permit. This shed was definitely over that size, and I was willing to bet they'd never gotten approval for it. I spent the next day compiling everything. I pulled clips of them keying my car, dumping trash, stealing packages. I pulled screenshots showing their unpermitted shed from multiple angles and dates to prove it had been there for months. I cross-referenced the HOA rules and highlighted the specific violations. Then I wrote a calm, professional email to the HOA board. I explained that I'd received a violation notice based on falsified evidence, and I was providing actual evidence of harassment and genuine rule violations. I attached everything and hit send. The response was fast. The HOA board took this seriously. They launched an investigation within days. I got a call from the board president apologizing for the initial violation notice and confirming that the photos submitted against me were clearly altered. They said they'd be following up with my neighbor regarding the complaints I'd submitted. I thanked them and waited. Things got very quiet next door after that. My neighbor stopped coming outside when I was around, stopped making eye contact. About a week later, I saw an HOA representative at their house taking photos and measurements of the shed. Then I got an email from the board confirming that my neighbor had been issued multiple violations. They were being fined for the unpermitted structure and for harassment. They had 30 days to tear down the shed and submit proof of removal, or face additional penalties. I watched from my window as contractors showed up a few weeks later to dismantle the shed. It took them an entire day. My neighbor stood in their yard looking miserable the whole time. I didn't gloat, didn't say anything. Just went about my business like nothing had happened. And here's where it gets absurd. About a month after the shed came down, I noticed a for sale sign go up in their front yard. They were moving. I don't know if it was because of the fines, the embarrassment, or just the realization that they'd completely screwed themselves by trying to screw me over. But either way, they were leaving. The house sold within 2 months. I watched the moving truck pull up on a Saturday morning. They loaded everything up, avoided looking in my direction the entire time, and drove off. I was sitting on my porch when they left. I didn't plan it, I just happened to be outside watering my plants. As their car pulled out of the driveway for the last time, I looked up and gave a small wave. They didn't wave back, just stared straight ahead and kept driving. I smiled, went back to my watering, and enjoyed the peace and quiet. The new neighbors who moved in a few months later are great, friendly, respectful, normal. We've had exactly 0 conflicts. They complimented my holiday decorations. They think my dog is cute. It's amazing how much better life is when the person next door isn't actively trying to ruin yours. Looking back, I think the funniest part of the whole situation is how easily it could have been avoided. If they just minded their own business, kept their complaints reasonable, or at the very least not tried to frame me with fake evidence, none of this would have happened. But they got greedy. They thought they could manipulate the system, thought I wouldn't fight back, thought they were smarter than everyone else, and in doing so, they handed me everything I needed to take them down. I still have all the footage saved, probably will forever, not because I need it, but because it's a good reminder that when people try to destroy you, sometimes the best thing you can do is just let them destroy themselves. All I did was make sure the right people saw what was actually happening. The rest took care of itself. My doorbell camera is still running, still recording everything, and every time I check the footage now, all I see is a quiet street, friendly neighbors, and absolutely 0 drama. Exactly the way it should be. And that's where we'll leave it tonight. 15 stories of betrayal, revenge, and proof that the internet never forgets. If you've made it this far, you're officially part of the Chaos Crew. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember, karma doesn't need your help, but a little digital evidence never hurt. Until next time, stay messy, stay petty, and keep those receipts handy.